One thing I can say about Ray Lepp is the Ray Lepp Award. When you consider the number of athletes that have received that award and because of that been able to stay in Canada and pursue high-level education while maintaining a top level of volleyball, they owe a debt of gratitude to his legacy.
We first met at the Dunbar Community Center, and I was a young whippersnapper of a referee, and I called Ray on a few different things because Ray was the big hotshot. And I thought I was a big hotshot, and the next thing you know, I had to eject Ray out of the gym. I mean, he was right, but I was the referee.
I'm just a little kid in the gym, but I always remember him as a referee and an administrator, always being present at big tournaments and big events. As a up-and-coming minor official, I had the chance to alliance keep or score keep when he was a top-level referee.
But the big one was 1965. We had the U.S. women and the U.S. men touring Canada to play volleyball against the Russians. And it was interesting, one of the coaches said, Ray Lepp is here. Ray was introduced to them. And he remembers, this coach remembers Ray from the early days when Ray was just a young volleyball player. That's an example of how well regarded Ray was in the Soviet Union.
From what I remember, and certainly the stories from Dale Ullman or my dad or other people, been somebody that really set the groundwork for Volleyball BC and the legacy that a lot of people celebrate through the receiving of the Ray Lepp Award is just a key factor in why he's a builder and deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
Ray Lepp deserves to be in the Hall of Fame for a myriad of reasons. Being one of the early founders of the Volleyball BC, being a referee, being a coach at UBC, both as my assistant coach and actually as the head coach at one time, working with us on our early provincial team programs as the chef de mission. The man covered everything. It's been my pleasure to have known Ray and to know the contribution that he made to volleyball in British Columbia. And I think it's most deserving that he is being inducted tonight into the Volleyball BC Hall of Fame.
I'm very honored tonight to be able to speak on behalf of Ray. If he were here tonight, if he was here tonight, he would be 95 years old. You're looking at the team picture up there. The fellow to his left is 93 years old. His name is Olaf Klassen. And he's still alive. He's living in Westminster, living with his daughter, but he's no longer mobile, so obviously wasn't able to be here tonight. But that whole team, notice they're wearing YMCA. I think that picture is around 1950, maybe late 40s, maybe early 50s. This group all arrived in Vancouver, not together, but separately. Before the Second World War, during the Second World War, after the Second World War. And they were all volleyball players. I didn't even recognize Ray in this picture. He's probably around 25 years old. And if you look really carefully, they're very proud of that championship. I'm pretty sure that that is the BC Open Championship, which was dominated by Vancouver YMCA for a long, long time. And this Estonian group won that tournament. I also think that this may have been the time that Ray had the kernel of an idea about beginning the Volleyball BC organization as a result of this experience playing in this tournament. It's just a theory, but it's my first gem of Ray for this evening. Next, we move on to 1989. April, I'm in my office at UBC, and I get a phone call, and it's Ray Lepp. And he never phones me, so I knew something was up. He said, Dale, would you be interested in having your team play an exhibition match against the Estonian national team? If anybody knows me, my record at UBC, I always jump at any chances to have international matches. And I said, sure, when are they coming over? And the dates were right around the time of our Thunderball tournament, where we had teams from NCAA and Canada, and often international teams playing in the tournament. So I decided that on the Thursday night, we would play our round-robin match at UBC as part of the tournament. What I didn't know was that history was being made that night. We had a very large numbers of the Estonian community come out to watch that match. And at the beginning of the match, both teams marched on the floor behind their flag. And they had the Estonian national anthem. I think an Estonian sang it. And there wasn't a dry eye in the house. I found out that was the first time that the Estonian national team, any Estonian national team, had marched behind their flag and heard their national anthem at an athletic event since 1939. And 1939 was the end of the first 20 years of Estonian independence. The only 20 years of Estonian independence that they had since the 12th century. They were always part of somebody else's empire. So it's pretty cool to be part of that wonderful event. Flash forward. Flash back. 1964. Day after Labor Day. War Memorial Gym. Standing at the railing with a big smile on my face. The reason I was smiling is because it was the first day I ever wore glasses that I could actually read things from the back wall. I've told this story before. Vic Lindell, unbeknownst to me, was sitting in the crowd looking for tall people. He came up to me, said, "Do you play volleyball?" I said, "What's volleyball?" I came from a high school that never played boys volleyball. He said, "We have a freshman team. I'm the head coach of the JV team. Why don't you come out and try the game out with the freshman team?" So 2 days later, I wandered into the gymnasium. Ray Lapp was my first coach. Ray Lapp was my first volleyball coach ever. That was my first volleyball practice. That was my first volleyball practice ever. I was god awful. It was back in the days where almost all contacts were underhand. You played overhand. You dug with your fingers, you serve receive with your fingers, you did everything with your fingers. What I didn't know is the rules were like American beach volleyball. If the ball rotated a half a rotation, the guy on the stand would go up like this. I thought he was saluting me with a V. He was signaling a double hit. Luckily for me, 5 freshmen from the Mission Roadrunners arrived at UBC at the same time I did. They had just won the provincial championship the previous year. They're pretty smart. They realized if I never touched the ball, the ref never blew the whistle. But they knew because I was tall, I was the tallest guy in the gym, that eventually I'd make a block in the front row as I was learning the game. Ray was the most patient man on earth. He never got mad. He never said anything. He showed me how to use my wrist in volleyball. Turns out he had one of the best wrists in the world. And that experience turned my whole life around, and volleyball became my life. Also part of that 1989 phone call was the fact that when the Estonian team arrived in Toronto, they found out that all the spending money that they brought, that they were going to buy new volleyball shoes and some money to spend on the trip, were in rubles, because Russia was controlling them by then. In those days, rubles were worthless outside of the Soviet Union. So they were penniless. When the team arrived in Vancouver, Ray had a cash pouch for every player. That included $60 to buy a brand new pair of shoes. So they were able to function just like a normal team that comes to Vancouver, has some money to spend, etc. So for him to leave a legacy of the Ray Lepp Scholarship was just an idea of how generous this man was. He was a true legend in the sport for BC, and I'm honored to be able to speak for him. Dagmar? Yeah.
Ray Lepp was himself, he was a man of very few words. So I just invite you for another time travel. And the year is 1940, where Ray found himself along with his teammates and countless young Estonian men in the trenches of the Second World War, instead of being on a volleyball court. So in 1944, Ray ended up in a prison camp in Germany, where daily sustenance included blades of grass growing along the barbed wire fence. Fortunately, liberated finally in 1948, he arrived in Vancouver and began a very meaningful second chapter. As I look back on the trajectory of Ray's life, it becomes clear that every step along the path had ultimately guided him and brought him to the place where he fully found his calling. It is also crystal clear that every step along the path ultimately has guided us here, each and one of us, where we are celebrating and honoring Ray Lepp and many others who had contributed so much to the highly technical and elegant sport of volleyball. And so we have come to love and appreciate, not by finding a perfect person, but by seeing an imperfect person perfectly. And to conclude, these words of Maya Angelou always remind me of Ray. When you know, teach. When you get, give. Thank you.